Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Ernie Delgado, Beyond Technology Education, and we're going to go ahead and get started on the presentation. We do have a guest who's going to be joining us, Rob Purcell with Paragon Micro. As soon as he comes on, we'll try to get him on as well. And let's go ahead and start the show here. If anyone has questions, there is a panel where you can send me a message and we'll try to get those questions answered at the end. This is part one of a two-part series. So today we're going to talk about some trends and statistics that we've kind of uncovered over the last several years regarding technology and education, things you should be aware of as you're technology planning. Part two is on Friday, and we'll cover more specifically how we've actually solved some problems for schools. So I highly encourage you to attend Friday's presentation as well, since they do lend themselves to each other. But one of the things we like to start our presentations with is just kind of a broad statement. As you know, we've been in this industry for almost 20 years now, and in that time we've learned a lot and we've seen a lot, and there's very few education or technology companies, let alone technology/education companies, that have really been around for 20 years. But with that timeline under our belt, we've seen a lot of fads, we've seen a lot of things come and go, and with that, we've learned a thing or two. And so we try to help schools kind of stay clear of fads and kind of focus on things that are really going to make a difference for the classroom long term, to improve teaching and learning. So from that perspective, as a technology planning and consulting company who have developed a very effective model to do that, we do feel that if you really plan your technology appropriately and correctly, this really can impact your school long term, because there are issues in education and the whole landscape is changing, but the technology and how you embrace it can make a big difference, not only to the quality of education you provide and the preparation you're giving students for the future, but also the perceptions of your parents and potential parents, and things you need to keep in mind as you're growing a school. With that said, we also feel that teachers being there on the front line, if you will, with students can save our country. There's a lot of indicators that show a decline in lots of different categories of our society. And as a country, I feel strongly that our classrooms and our teachers can give our students the tools to be competitive, not only today but into the future. This is becoming more and more critical. And as I mentioned, over 20 years, seeing these things and having that kind of perspective on how we fit in the big picture of K-12 education, there are two startling trends that we have seen lately that we need to address as educators. And one of the big trends is the fact that technology and the use of technology in our students' personal lives is exploding. And this isn't the big news. This isn't, you know, the information that's really surprising anybody. The real big issue is the fact that the biggest group, or I should say the fastest growing group of users, are adults ages 36 to 65. Now, this is an important number to understand because that represents most of your teachers. And everything that we see out there really comes back to the quality of training and support you give your teachers. If we had to point to one thing that's really keeping this whole technology integration concept from moving forward quicker, it's the fact that teachers aren't prepared. And that's not their fault. It's just a lot of them have been teaching for a while. Technology wasn't a real big part of the curriculum back when they were going through college, but that's changing. Not only are our universities changing their approach, but adults are getting their hands on technology and devices at home quicker than ever. But again, I still see a strong disconnect between how they're using them at home and how they're using them in the classroom. I see this as an opportunity, one of the biggest opportunities that we can really get teachers prepared and ready, comfortable to use the technology, and that's something I see as a positive. Now, not quite so positive is the fact that we are not, and when I say we, K-12 as an industry are not preparing students as well as we should for the future. And I just say that because I look at it as a global perspective. actually seen how other countries have done this, and my partner Rick Harrell had his hands in developing some international technology plans. Yeah, other countries are kind of trying to leapfrog ahead of us, and there's this mentality that, you know, the United States is weak right now, their economy is struggling, this is our chance to get ahead. I don't see that happening. I feel that, again, our classrooms can really provide the skill set to prepare students. And right now, corporate America is asking K-12, how can we really prepare kids and give them the tools to be competitive in the workplace so that we could kind of strengthen our situation here domestically. Now, with those two key points in mind, there's three areas that we're going to get into in this 45, 50-minute webinar. One is just understanding some of the trends, somewhat disturbing, that are happening in our education industry, some of the challenges that you as an educational leader should address as you're looking at some of these changes you need to make, and then what are some of the steps and strategies that you should be aware of as you are reevaluating your technology plan. And that's something that we like to share with schools. You know, a technology plan should not be a one-stop shop, one document that's done forever. It's something that you address and touch bases on, and you keep it alive by constantly evaluating it and reevaluating your strategies. Technology is one of the fastest changing things ever, and the technology plan should kind of keep up with that pace. Now, when we start working with the school, you know, as a planning company, we're not just saying, you know, this is the kind of equipment you need and this is what your teachers need to be doing. We really take a step back and look at the entire fabric of a school landscape and how are they doing things. And there are some things that you have control over. There are some things you don't have control over. But one of the things that we have learned, one of the more consistent elements of a good, well-run school, in schools that I have seen that have made the biggest difference of technology, they possess one key element. Good schools have good leaders. And when I say good leaders, a leader is someone who goes out and not just leads by example, but is constantly evaluating options and how to improve the school site. And the fact that you are attending this webinar this morning kind of shows me that you are interested in how to improve your school. Good for you. And that's a step in the right direction, and from experience, that is one of the elements of a really well-run school is leadership. Now, getting into trends. Now, it's pretty interesting. You know, I have lots of young cousins, and it's interesting to see how young these kids are getting involved with technology. Younger and younger every year. Actually, they say as young as 3.5 years old, kids are really starting to access and have access to technology. That's kind of interesting because when they come to you as kindergartners or elementary age students, they already have that understanding of these tools. So the trend, and this is just getting younger and younger, and it's increasing every year. But something we found really interesting 5 years ago, the research shows that students between the ages of 8 and 18 years old were spending between 6.5 and 8.5 hours per day accessing media. Now, that was startling back then, but what's even more startling is the fact that today that number has actually jumped to 10 hours and 45 minutes a day. Now, when I was doing this research and came across this statistic, I really drilled down and tried to figure out what is it they're talking about here. That's a lot of time. And the real element is the fact that kids are multitasking. And when I say multitasking, they're doing multiple technology things at the same time. And I actually saw this happen when I went to visit one of my cousins, and I went into the room of a teenage boy and went to go see what was going on in there. And he was in there with his buddies playing Xbox. He had his wireless controller. He had his wireless headset with a microphone. And he was actually talking to someone he was playing with in Germany or somewhere in Europe. He was listening to his podcast on his iPod, and he had his smartphone next to him, and he had a text message conversation going on. Now, do you think his parents had anything to do with setting up that environment? Not at all. The kids today are using these multi-layered environments. He was pairing all his devices. He got all that to work all by himself without the help of his parents. And this is what the kids have at home in their daily lives. And I point this out because a lot of times when I visit schools, you know, the kids go to the school and they are asked not to use the tools that they're comfortable with. They're not using digital media. In fact, cell phones are usually banned if there's no cell phone policy. So it's just something to think about. If our students are using these tools so much, how can we take those tools and apply them to the teaching and learning process? There's a lot of schools and a lot of processes that are spending time here because these are tools that are available. Kids have them. There's no investment required by the school, and they know how to use them already. Again, we need to get the teachers to understand, and that's happening more and more. A lot of things are coming together. The number one tool out there is still the cell phone, and the cell phones are becoming more complex. They do a lot more than they used to. Sometimes kids even make phone calls on them, believe it or not. But most of the time, they're text messaging or they're emailing, and this is still two of the key elements that students are using. And there are ways to use these tools within the classroom environment. Now, every industry has what we call the killer app. And right now, the reason we're seeing such a strong increase in teachers using technology is the social networking aspect. I mean, everyone is Facebooking. YouTube is growing exponentially. These are the kind of communication tools that are available, and schools are finding ways to use some of these models, maybe not the actual live sites, but simulated sites, to get kids and teachers excited about using technology. Now, when I say that, a lot of people have a negative connotation. We've done some research, and we actually found that students are using some of these social networking areas in two distinctive ways. Yes, there's the friendship-driven model where they're kind of hanging out with their friends, kind of like going to the mall online and doing whatever. But there's also the interest-driven category, and this is really exciting, but because social networking gives you communication directly to experts. A lot of musicians and artists and scientists and science organizations and museums have these information sites that they're social, and they allow for intercommunication between groups. And students are actually getting firsthand information straight from the author, or straight from the scientist, or straight from the facility that's doing this research. So it's not always, social networking isn't always just a purely social thing, but can be used for very high-level educational reasons, and we're finding that a lot of educators are getting these tools built into their curriculum, and this is kind of where we're trying to lead people, is how do we access more information and not try to break the bank on your budget. I did mention text messaging a moment ago, and I'm going to touch on this again because one of the things we like to caution administrators, one of the challenges, and we're going to get into this a little more in a minute, is the variety of backgrounds and interest levels of your teachers. And we have a lot of teachers that are considered millennials, younger teachers that are coming in. They really are using technology all day, every day, even in their personal lives, and finding ways to use it at school. Can these tools be 21st century tools built into the classroom? That's a big question asked by many people. And one of the things that we've kind of been advising people on is how do we take these 21st century tools and get them worked into the classroom. We have a lot of schools ask us, what are 21st century skills and how do I access them? How do I get them involved in my curriculum? These are good questions to ask. As educators, yes, we have our standards-based curriculum. Yes, we are a testing environment. And yes, we have standardized tests that we have to bring into our schools and do with our students. However, if you look at some of the things that we are testing, these are skills that oftentimes not only can they be outsourced, but are being outsourced to other countries. So really, we need to ask ourselves, are we preparing our kids to be really well-mannered, with good values, educated burger flippers, or are we giving them the skill set to be successful tomorrow? We call them 21st century skills, and how do we bring these into the classroom? Well, the first thing you need to do is understand exactly what they are and how they fit into the big picture. Now, what we've done is we've looked at some of the fastest growing jobs out there in the working world. And this is a list here. It came from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. The fastest growing jobs, this is from 2009. And if you look at this list, yeah, they require the use of technology, obviously, higher order thinking skills, complex problem solving. There's a lot of things that are happening here. Now, if you look at this same list from 10 years ago, Let's go back to 1999. Then let's go back to 1989. Let's go back to 1979. And if you look at the list every 10-year juncture, you'll see that every 10 years the use of technology, the need for complex problem solving, the need for higher order thinking skills increases, increases, and increases over time. So with that data, with those data points, being the smart people we are, if we want to look at 2019 or 2029, do you think that the use of technology and the need for 21st century learning skills is going to decrease or increase? Well, obviously the answer is increase. And this is the big challenge we have as educators. We're talking about a moving target, a future target that we have no idea exactly what it's going to look like. However, we do know that technology will be important. It will be critical. So how do we work that into our lesson plans and our daily educational systems? This is the really important question. If we are preparing students for the future, just teaching the standards is no longer enough. We need to give them the skills, the abilities, the creativity, and the knowledge to be competitive now and into the future. Now, I mentioned we've been doing this for almost 20 years, and there's a lot of things that we like to work into a school's curriculum. But if I had to say the one skill that is really the most required and that will help the students be prepared for the future the most is the concept of complex problem solving. If we could give them that ability, if we teach them to walk up to any technology environment and be able to figure it out, that's the skill that is going to help them remain competitive forever. This stuff's going to continue to change, and none of us knows exactly what it's going to look like, but we do know it's going to be important. We do know it's going to be critical. Actually, some of the research out there gets pretty strong. The language they use, it gets a little scary. The post-industrial age and capitalism requires information technology. The third bullet, it'll be a critical factor in generating and accessing wealth, power, and knowledge in our time. Now, those are strong words that I pulled out of this particular research report. But, if you think about it, it's no longer about the haves and the have-nots. It's about the knows and the know-nots. What do you know? Knowledge is going to be so important, and be able to access information. You could see what's happening in the Middle East. You could see what's happening across the country when people have access to information. Change, social change is happening. Our students, our future leaders need to understand how these tools can be used for good, how they can be used to improve the quality of their lives so they could get into these better paying jobs, because we want our students to be able to be good leaders that have good values, that use technology in a positive way. Now, growing up, there was this distinction between laborers and knowledge workers, white collar, blue collar. Well, that model is kind of upside down now. They've changed it around a little bit, and there's actually a three-way breakdown these days. There's the production worker. That's kind of the hands-on person. There's the service workers. Hospital attendants, janitors, and then there's the symbolic analysts. Now, that's the fastest growing segment of our economy. Engineers, scientists, executives, these are the people that use technology. Now, the interesting fact, even though the common perception is those are the people that need the most amount of technology, pretty much every category today requires some level of understanding the use of technology. Technology and understanding what it can do is no longer an optional skill. These are the skills that students need not only today but into the future. I know we want to think that every one of our kids is going to move on into college and get a college degree. Well, the fact of the matter is not all of them will. But if we're preparing them with technology skills, that problem-solving ability, that complex problem-solving that I keep talking about, we give them the opportunity to maybe not just be some of these lower level positions, but be able to create a career, maybe not even with the college degree, but still be able to have that symbolic analyst level career. It's possible today with the information available, with the tools available, with the information infrastructures available. You need to prepare your kids for whatever choice they make in the future for careers, and technology has to be part of that. Now, one of the other interesting components that I pulled out of the research was, it used to be, doing this for 20 years, I've heard a lot of different reasons why we can't do technology. And one of the biggest reasons is we don't have computers. We don't have that. We can't afford computers. Well, the research shows that 95% of classrooms in America have access to computers with internet access. So that's no longer an excuse. I mean, the research shows pretty much technology is everywhere. So the point is, if we're finding that students are accessing technology younger and adults are using it, people 8 to 80 are using computers more than ever, and if we also know that schools have computers in their classroom with the internet more than ever, then why aren't they being used more effectively? And that's the big question I ask myself, and I actually have an answer. I think it's a pretty good answer. And the fact of the matter is, there's just not a model. A model has not been developed that everyone subscribes to. If you're a math teacher, there's a whole math organization that has strategies on teaching math at different grade levels. For science, for language arts, for technology, it's kind of across the board. And this is what we bring to the table is a model. I'm going to be sharing that model on Friday, our Beyond Technology Integration model. Saves you time, saves you money. Lots of happy people doing that. So make sure that you do on Friday, or do join us on Friday. Let me talk about some of the challenges I come across all the time. Now, most schools have some sort of issue. I haven't seen any perfect environment anywhere. And usually these are the 4 main categories of problems I see. We can really help schools in 2 of the areas, the teacher component and the curriculum, the 21st century skills curriculum component, which will benefit the other 2 areas as well. Now, teachers, if I had to break it down, this whole technology integration thing, teachers is the biggest category that is the biggest variable that needs the biggest amount of help and resources. And the reason I say that, if you have 12 teachers, if you have 50 teachers, if you have 150 teachers at your school, that's 12, that's 50, or 150 different ability levels. Now, as a school administrator, it's difficult to develop a plan that meets 150 different ability levels or 50 different ability levels. And I use the analogy that, let's say you're a 3rd grade teacher and you're teaching math. You might have 4 or 5 different levels of math within your class. It's easy to adapt your instruction and modify for those 5 different ability levels, but a school principal that has 50 classroom teachers with 50 different ability levels, very challenging to get them all on the same page using the same tools. And so this is the bottleneck. So we try to spend a lot of time helping schools understand this piece. We do know that it's the fastest growing user group. Teachers are using technology at home. They do have the iPads. They do have laptops. I think 95% of airplane tickets are now purchased online. So we're seeing all these different categories where teachers are accessing technology. Social networking, obviously, is the biggest. We also learned that teachers have access to technology. We know that most classrooms have it. And we also know the research proves that trained teachers that have been trained to use technology, produce higher achieving students. You can't argue with the data. That has been the case for the last 15 years. The missing piece that we have learned, we call it the 3 C's: confidence, competence, and content. And this is an area that as you're developing your plan, you need to find a way to build up the confidence of your staff. You need to get them competent with the different tools available. And then content. And I'm not talking about downloading worksheets off the internet. I'm not talking about software-based solutions, but actually working with the existing lesson plans and enhancing them. We get into the 3 C's in detail on Friday. Now, and I kind of touched on this a minute ago, the reason why there is such a disparity among teachers is the fact that teachers have identities that are tied into their generational differences and the different generations that they come from. You have these basically 3 major categories where millennials, Generation Xers, and baby boomers that are in classrooms. And those 3 generations have 3 completely different perspectives on how they should be teaching with technology or teaching in general, because they were raised in a different environment, economically, socially, in so many different ways. And so I kind of break it down into this and help educators understand These people look at this problem from 3 completely different sets of eyes, and be aware of that as you're developing your plan. Millennials, it's an interesting study because these are younger teachers that they don't know a world again without technology. They're a little closer in their perspective to students today, and they're using technology more than ever. They're the ones that, they have the iPads that are bringing into school. They have the smartphone. They might even already be doing some pretty significant stuff with technology. When we do our staff assessments, I find that teachers fall into a bell-shaped curve. And the real strong teachers, usually that's about 10 to 15% of a teaching staff, we call them rock stars. A lot of times they fall into this category. They don't need our help, really. They are already doing technology. Maybe some of them might need a little guidance and training and support, but they pretty much need more resources. Now, the challenge I find with a lot of schools is when they do their technology planning, because this is the group that's kind of hands-on, this is the group that's already using it, they're usually the ones in charge of developing the technology plan. This sometimes leads to problems, and I'll tell you why. If they're developing a plan, they're going to develop a plan that meets their needs. They're rock stars. They want the one-to-one iPad programs. They want the wireless campus. They want all these tools and all these integration options. However, the other 80 or 90% of the staff is not ready for that. And I see this happen often. It causes a little debate on campus because that should be the model in 3 years. So let's take that model that those millennials or rock stars want, and let's make sure we put that in the right timeline, and let's make sure everyone comes along. And so you don't want to always put millennials in charge of the technology plan because they're going to create this high-end plan that no one's going to really going to use or be ready for except for them. It's a big challenge I see happening very, very often, more often than I like to admit. But if you break down the different categories of teachers and look at how they're looking at technology, the millennials obviously are on task. Generation Xers are not too far behind. And usually it's the Xers and the Boomers that we need to develop a more relevant technology training and a plan that really embraces their needs. A lot of times schools will try to do the online option. There's some online training, and that's going to be good for some of your higher level teachers, but some of your other teachers may respond better to traditional face-to-face training methods, hands-on training methods. Some modeling should take place. Let them see how this should happen before they're really required to do this. Now, we usually have schools look at things in 3-year chunks. So as you're developing your technology plan, the half-day in-service or the one-day in-service is not your answer. It's going to take a 3-year process that requires training for that confidence part, requires some kind of curriculum modeling from a specialist for the competence part. And then it's going to require someone really sitting down with teachers and with their lesson plans and massaging those plans to take advantage of the technology available. That's the content phase. And this happens over a 3-year period, sometimes 2, sometimes 4. But the 3 years is a good timeline, a good rule of thumb to get everyone up to speed. Now, even with that investment in time, you're still not going to have 100%. You still might have a teacher or two that isn't quite ready to move up. That's okay. At least there will be the curriculum we modified, and the students will still have access to a lot of these integrated approaches. One of the challenges I still see is some schools that rely on the software-based approaches. Now, there are some good software approaches. I do like some of the software approaches out there, but most of them have actually been proven through research to be counterproductive, especially some of the math programs that are out there. Now, the reason why this happens, and I've kind of figured out why schools do this, is a lot of times it's because it's easy. You install a program, the kids come in, it's like playing a game. They pretty much are independent. The teacher doesn't have a whole lot of say in what's happening. And so because it's easy, the teachers are doing it. Same thing with some of these web-based approaches. And it comes down to the fact that the teachers just don't have the ability to do some of the more significant integrated methods. So they go to the easiest thing, which is software-based solutions or web-based solutions or worksheet-based solutions. Now, kids do not need your help to learn how to play games. They do need help to learn how to learn spreadsheets or databases or graphics. So again, this problem will be taken care of once you start providing the right level of training and support to your staff. That's going to be the big thing that happens. Another trend that we have really been keeping our eye on is the fact that there are so many different schooling options today. And again, put yourself in the place of a parent. Put yourself in their shoes and look at all the different options today. The public schools, the charter schools, the private schools, the online schools, and now you have blended schools where it's a combination of all those. Now, the reason why these things are happening is that the technology provides so many resources. And I am actually seeing some really exciting things happen in the blended school arena, where the traditional school or the charter school or the private school is actually tapping into some of these online resources to supplement with their teaching. Now, one of the things that we tell schools, we don't ever tell a school, you need to just throw out your curriculum and we need to start from scratch. That's not our model. What we do is we look at how you're introducing content, how you're generating information and processing information, and how your students are doing things, and how can we make that process better with technology, not by bringing something new on top, but weaving the technology in. And that gets everyone kind of comfortable in a little easier fashion. Because we're doing this over a time period, you're getting the teachers confident over time. But at the end of the day, if you don't start getting your teachers prepared for some of these other environments, you're going to miss the boat. These things we're talking about, these online opportunities, are just going to increase. Talking to experts online, these opportunities are just going to increase. The tools like the iPads and the book readers, these things are just going to increase. So I'm not saying you have to start doing these things today. But what I am saying is you need to start preparing your staff, your teachers, your infrastructure, your curriculum. Because if you're not prepared within the next 3 to 5 years, these tools are going to be commonplace. And if you're not able to bring them into your environment, you may be at a disadvantage. And parents are going to have options. And these other options, they're doing these things. We all need to be able to use these tools within the classroom. And again, I'm not saying today, but start getting your teachers comfortable. Now, if you look at the big picture, the reason why we need to do this, and I touched on it in the very beginning of my presentation, our teachers in the classroom is going to save our country. Our students need to understand, they need access to these methods. They need to understand complex problem solving and how technology can be used not only today to become better learners, but in the future to be better citizens and prepared for these higher paying jobs. The data shows that right now, as a country, we're not doing that hot. We barely break the top 10 in some really important key areas. We need to fix that immediately. And there's some legislation going through the federal government now, TIMS, technology, engineering, math, and science, where there's going to be significant funding available for schools that are on board with some of these things. A race to the top funding will soon be available for California schools. So these are the kind of things, if we're not putting ourselves in a position to take advantage of these things, again, we're going to miss the boat. And again, I'm not saying that today you need to do things. I'm saying today you need to start planning to get people in place, teachers, curriculum, infrastructure, to be able to do some of these things and be able to get some of the funding that's going to be available. Another big aspect of the high-tech boom that we're seeing is the fact that a lot of your lower socioeconomic students, the school's the only place they're going to have access to technology. You're the only one that's going to give them the ability to learn how these tools work. And I could do a whole another 3-hour seminar on how technology can impact the generational cycles of a student. A lot of your kids, they're in these environments where they don't see potential, they don't see opportunity, they don't see how they can break out of this cycle. you provide that opportunity for them. The school will give them the tools, or can give them the tools, to be competitive and break that economic cycle that sometimes they're in because of their situation at home. We don't want to make that situation worse. We want to give the kids access to these tools so they know how to do these things. One of the really neat examples I have is when I worked with the school in Pasadena, where the students were bused in from a lower economic part of town. They got access to this high-level technology program. Their API score went up 82 points in one school year, and these kids were just on fire with technology. The principal of the school got a phone call from the librarian of the local library where those kids were bused from, and the librarian said, "What's going on at your school? We have 2 or 3 computers here, and there's a line of kids wanting to use them." And so the principal said, "Well, we have this new technology program, and our kids are just learning and using technology in a very practical way." And the librarian says, "Are you going to keep that program?" She said, "Yes." So the librarian actually ordered more computers. Those kids now were sparked with the technology bug, and they now are using technology in a very practical way, not just to be better learners, but actually using it in their library environment to learn for homework and things like that as well. Now, again, going back to the higher, lower socioeconomic situation, unfortunately, what I'm finding is a lot of the lower socioeconomic schools are relying on the computer games. They're relying on some of these worksheet environments, whereas some of you more progressive schools, some of your more higher-end schools are doing some of the more high-level technology things. So we're seeing a real increase in how we're doing things in different ways at the opposite ends of the spectrum. That needs to change as well. The technology can be the great equalizer for language barrier, for skill level, for so many different reasons. Kids can use this technology to kind of get them caught up with everyone else. So let me get to the last part. Let's talk about some strategies. I've been talking about trend statistics. What can we do to improve the situation? Well, I mentioned teachers a minute ago. It's the #1 category. You can buy all the computers in the world and install them in your school. You could have a computer in the hand of every student, but if your teachers don't have confidence, competence, and content, that technology is not going to be used effectively. So we talk about these 3 C's, and you'll hear me put together, I always say that a simple plan is a plan that will be implemented. A complex plan is going to sit on the shelf and collect dust. I've seen it a million times. So I kind of break things into bullet points, things that you can remember. The 3 C's, confidence, competence, content. Remember that. That is a key idea to help your plan go to the next level. How do we get them confident? Well, that happens from training. How do we get them competent? You need an expert to show them. I'm talking about a computer teacher to show them how these lessons can be delivered. And then content is someone has to sit down with them and show them how their lessons can be rewritten, not give them something new to do, not give your teachers a new lesson plan that they have to learn and figure out how to fit into their school day, but weave technology into what they already do. The second key thing is engaging students. This is the easiest part of the whole process. Again, your students do not know a world without technology. How do we create more complex problem-solving opportunities for your students? How do we create more project-based learning opportunities? How do we start using some of these innovative methods that with the tools that the students are already comfortable with? I've seen some teachers use cell phones in the classroom very successfully. iPod touches, iPads. They're these tools that your kids already have at home. A lot of schools are actually creating a minimum standard list, and they hand it out before Christmas. Because during Christmas, parents are looking for ideas. What am I going to buy my kids? Well, if you tell the school they need these minimum specs for a smartphone or these minimum specs for a tablet or iPad, then you could start getting the parents to actually buy some of these tools. And it doesn't mean every kid has to have one. I've seen some environments where there's teams of students, and one student is in charge of the tablet or the iPad or the smartphone, and the kids are working with them. Collaborative projects. Don't be afraid of these tools is what I'm saying. Embrace them. I went to a school one time, and on the door was one of those shoe holders that you put on the back of your closet, and there's different slots for your shoes. And I was wondering, every classroom had one of those, and I wondered why. And I asked, And when the kids came into the classroom, everyone had to put their cell phone in there to make sure they didn't use them. We need to kind of change that. We need to have a policy, yes. There needs to be a procedure. There needs to be some kind of security to make sure that it doesn't become a hindrance. I watch my goddaughter when she does her homework, her cell phone's right there. She uses it as a calculator. She'll text her friends and they'll collaborate on things. The kids are using these at home. Let's find a way. I mean, they're there and it's cheap. Have any of you read this book, Outliers, by Malcolm Gladwell? Really interesting story. I bring it up because there's a couple points in there that I think are applicable to what we do in the classroom. Outliers is the story of successful men and women. What makes them successful? Is it extraordinary talent? Is it parenting? Is it environment? It kind of asks all those questions, but there was a couple key points that I thought were pretty interesting. One was the concept of birth date, and they used the example of junior hockey players in Canada. Now, I'm not a big hockey fan, but I do know that Canada loves their hockey, and from a very young age, as kindergartners on up, they actually put a stick in their hand, and if they're really good as a kindergartner, they're put into a better group of players. And so if they're with better players, they get better coaches. So if they get better coaches, they get better training. So what they're finding is in that they looked at the junior hockey team, and 40% of this high-level hockey team, 40% of them were born between January and March. And someone did the research, I think it was Gladwell, and found that this was consistent on all the hockey teams. 40% were born between January and March. So he drilled down and did the research. And what he found out, in hockey, the cutoff is January 1st. So if you're born before that, you missed the boat. If you're born January 1st, then you get the more time. So kids born between January and March got more practice. And so that meant they were a little bigger, which meant they were a little more coordinated. So these better kids got better coaching, better teammates, more playing time. So all the odds were kind of stacked in their favor, and it led to them becoming, better hockey players. So Gladwell suggested in education, that same thing happens for us. Our kindergartners are grouped and they all come in at the same time, and they compete against students that were brought in and are born at different times of the year. What if we broke students into 3 groups? It was an interesting concept, and they could compete with each other. This birth date concept could be applied to lots of different things, and I think he did apply it to many different situations. The other interesting, okay, I'm trying to get my slide to move forward. There was another interesting concept that he brought in, and it was the concept called the 10,000 hour rule. And the 10,000 hour rule suggested that the key to success in any field is not based completely on talent, but on practice. And the number that he evaluated was 10,000 hours. That's 10,000. If you practice something 20 hours a week for 10 years, that gives you 10,000 hours of time and makes you an expert. And he looked at this rule and applied it to composers, to athletes, musicians, chess players, and he even applied it to business leaders, scientists, etc. And it occurred to him that it takes the brain 10,000 hours to assimilate everything it needs, all the synapses to connect in order to truly achieve mastery in a certain subject. And so he had a couple examples I wanted to bring up to you, but one of them was the rule, the case study on Bill Joy. Now, this was a very bright student, graduated high school very young, actually started college at the University of Michigan at the age of 16 years old. Now, what was interesting about Bill Joy and the fact that he chose the University of Michigan, at that time, the University of Michigan, 1971, was one of the most advanced computer science programs in the world. If all the colleges in the world, he chose that one, which happened to have, this high-level technology center. And the fact of the matter that center was right by his house, open 24 hours a day. So he was in there all day, every day, learning about programming at a very young age, day and night. When he moved over to Berkeley, he had a similar experience, and he earned his PhD over at Berkeley. And then he rewrote Unix. He co-founded Sun Microsystems and is one of the guys that helped to invent the internet. but you could see a couple things fell into place where he had the 10,000 hours of experience to do that. And if he wouldn't have gone to the University of Michigan, he wouldn't have had that experience or that opportunity. The more common analogy is the Bill Gates story. And if you haven't heard it, it's fascinating. When Bill Gates went to a private school in Washington, in the Seattle, Washington area in 1968, the parent group raised money, and they actually bought computer programming time for the students that wanted to learn about computer programming. And as a young kid, that interested Bill Gates, so he jumped on it. While he was doing that, another parent that from the school knew these kids were doing this programming and needed someone to help at their company, hired these kids to do more programming, which led to another job at another company doing more programming. When he attended University of Washington, similar to Bill Joy, he had a computer lab, had free access to computers. When he dropped out of Harvard, he had been programming for 7 years. He had way more than 10,000 hours of practice. But if you hear Bill Gates talk about this, and this is a quote, Bill Gates said, "I had better exposure to software development than anyone in that period of time, and all because of an incredibly lucky series of events." I think luck is when opportunity meets preparation. Many of you probably agree with me. How can we create that similar kind of luck for our students? What can we do? How can we apply the 10,000 hour rule to what we do as educators? So I took a stab at this, and please poke holes in this theory of mine. But what if we were really trying to figure out one thing that we want to do for 10,000 hours for our students? As I mentioned earlier, the concept of complex problem solving. How can we get our students more time really using technology to solve problems? Here's my chart, and if you look at this chart, on the left, a computer class. A 1 hour a week computer class for 36 weeks, that's 36 hours. Let's say they're doing complex problem solving within the classroom, and again, there's way more than 10 hours a week that they're in the classroom, but the actual really focused problem solving time, 10 hours a week, I think is easy to do for 36 weeks, and we're up to 360 hours there. 5 hours a week where they're complex problem solving in their homework. Now, I know they do more homework than that oftentimes, but 5 hours of real problem solving time, again, for 36 weeks. Reading something really, that gets their juices flowing, a couple hours a week, usually year-round, 52 weeks a year. I feel that summertime is an amazing opportunity to give our parents ideas on what they could supplement the school year with. Places to go, museums to see. Give them little worksheets where they could do stuff with their students, or have a website where they could actually, create things or do things substantial during the summer. 3 hours a week for 16 weeks of the summer, and then another hour of some other kind of complex problem solving for 52 weeks a year. But if we did that, I think that's achievable. You can move some of those numbers around here and there, but that's 780 hours a year. Times 13 years, a K through 12 environment, happens to be 10,140 hours. So again, I'm trying to apply the 10,000 hour rule to what we do. This is just a simple idea that I came up with, but I think that if we really help our students fine-tune this ability, if we really show them more ways that they could learn, because this is really the reason we do this, is when students use technology, they retain more information, they get more excited about the learning process, they learn more, they retain more, and they take those skills on with them into the future, and it just multiplies on top of each other. We need to get teachers in this environment so that we can do this more. And this is just a model. I'm not saying it's the way to go, but when we help schools develop technology plans, this is definitely in the back of our mind. Our instructional design team, when they sit down with teachers and try to address lesson plans, we don't want to do just simple worksheets and answer questions. We want to create projects where teachers and students and team members are collaborating, doing complex problem-solving based activities to learn mathematics, to learn science, to learn social studies, religion, whatever it is they're learning at school. The technology lends itself to that. And I see so many schools that have these high-level environments, and they're not achieving that. They're playing games, or they're accessing websites, and you can do so much more. And that's where we really get involved with schools and help them do that. The third key solution is the integration concept. I've been touching on it along the whole way, but It's no longer about putting on a headset and pressing Y's and N's and arrow keys on your keyboard and answering questions. That's obsolete. That's old school. We need to use the computer as a problem-solving tool, where students are learning how to understand and manipulate data, collaborate with other students, and use multiple environments and multiple tools, and really understand how these tools can affect the learning environment. Students understand technology, but they need to be focused on how to use it for learning. And teachers need to be part of that conversation. And obviously, your curriculum needs to be modified. This is a big category, but using the computer as a problem-solving tool is how we should be approaching the process. And we recommend an organic approach to this, where the technology actually drives the curriculum. I'm sorry, where the curriculum, let me spin that around, where the curriculum actually drives the technology. And if you let the curriculum drive the technology, you'll get more people that buy in. Now, I wanted to spend some time on some other things, but there was a really powerful announcement that came out this week that you should all be aware of. Apple has announced 2 new pieces of their puzzle, and they're, we feel strongly about the iPad. Not as a step 1 tool, but it should be part of your 3-year timeline. We still feel very strongly about computers. But there's this new iBooks textbook initiative for iPad, and they have some of the big publishers on board. You need to be aware of this initiative, because for the first time in a long time, the digital textbook is starting to become more and more of a reality. And I'm not, again, I'm not trying to scare you about these things. I'm trying to make you aware that these things are happening now, and if you're not planning for them within the next 3 to 5 years, you're doing a disservice to yourself, to your school, and to your students. You need to be aware of what these trends are. This is real. If it comes out of Apple's mouth, it's most likely going to happen, and it's going to be successful. They're amazing at a lot of different things. The other big tool is the iBooks Author. And I see so much potential here for teachers. This is where the tools are given away for free, where teachers can create their own digital book. Really, what I see it becoming is a digital lesson planning creation tool. And I see this big, huge environment of sharing with each other, as we do as educators. These are 2 new initiatives from Apple. If you're not aware of iTunes University, that's been around for a while. But with these 3 pieces in place, Apple is becoming much more involved with your curriculum planning. And again, if you're not preparing yourself, you need to be aware. And I'm just kind of lighting the fire here. You need to do your research or bring us in to help you understand these things, what this means to your technology planning. Things will change. Now, as of today, and I'm going to get into this way more on Friday. As of today, I still feel very strongly that you need to be using computers. iPads are great, but computers are critical. Computers, you could do so much more. Tablets and iPads are still limited. So if you're planning that kind of stuff right now, talk to us so we can give you our advice. But there's a lot of other ways to get started with technology. And iPads is one of them, but there might be some better models. But that should be part of a 3-year plan. I was mentioning cell phones earlier. There's actually a book out by a teacher called Toys to Tools, Cell Phones in the Classroom. And again, we're not saying you have to do this today. What I am saying is you need to be aware of some of the dynamics that are happening, some of the trends that are taking place, because things are changing. And so we're trying to just let you be aware of what those things are and how to be prepared. And I'm going to finish up with something, and if Rob's on the line, I'll let him jump on and talk about some of his Microsoft ideas real quick. But a report done by IBM kind of encapsulate everything we're talking about. In this report was a study of CEOs from around the globe, and asked the question, what should we be preparing our students for? What do you think we need to be giving them to be competitive and productive? And really, their answers broke down into 3 categories. And now, real quick, if you think back to the 80s, IBM owned technology in the 80s. And IBM had very strict perception that they wanted about themselves. They were usually males in blue suits, red ties, black wingtips, and they all looked alike. That was the IBM person. Now, if you look at what they're saying today, skills that students need, they need to embrace ambiguity. They need to leapfrog beyond tried and true management styles. Now, when I first read this, it actually made me laugh. That's 180 degrees different from what they used to say in the 80s. They're saying your kids need to be different and challenge business models, outside of the box thinking. That is so different from the IBM of the 80s. That's how far we've come in 10 years, 20 years. The second thing, reinventing customer relationships. You know, the traditional marketing model of buying an ad in the newspaper or advertising in the Super Bowl, that's no longer the way to go. They want to come straight at you through your inbox, through your cell phone, like this, like that, join my Twitter feed. Kids embrace that environment. That's only going to become more and more commonplace as time rolls on. And then the third thing is the concept of operating dexterity. And of everything in this report, the thing that jumped out the most, it's the second bullet, managing complexity. You know, what it said is we live in a very complex world, and it's only going to get more complex. We need not be afraid of that, but we need to challenge our students to understand how to live in these new environments, how to understand how to manage complexity. And again, technology is the answer. Does this look familiar to anybody? This is how I learned. I learned on a TRS-80 Model 2 computer, and I had a computer in high school. I think I was the only kid in high school with the computer. My dad brought it home. I was very fortunate to have access to technology at a very young age. And I will be honest with you, I was a very average student until technology kind of reinvented me as a student. I got excited. It was a whole other way of presenting my projects, and the fact that I was getting A's when before I was getting C's, you know, that encouraged me that, hey, I might be onto something here. And the simple fact that I was turning it in, produced on a word processor and printed out on a dot matrix printer, which in today's standards is junk. But it gave me the chance to communicate better, get excited about learning. And I'm telling you, you have students today that are just looking for a way to get excited. They have access to all this stuff, and then they come to school and they don't. How do we even that playing field? How do we get to the next step? I'd like you to read this quote real quick. Being in this industry for 20 years, I've seen a lot of things change, and I've seen a lot of things come and go. And I like to feel that we've identified some of the ultimate truths when it comes to technology integration. And there's lots of ways. If I approached 100 different schools, I'll see 100 different models of how they're using technology, and most of them aren't good. So what we've done as an organization is we've really kind of helped develop this technology model, which helps planning and preparing you. And it's a simplified approach because we've peeled all the layers back on the onion, and we've come up with something that is simple, easy to implement, and will help you achieve your educational goals as well as your technology goals. And we partner with schools. And we're not saying that it's a one-size cookie-cutter approach, because it's not. We work with you, and we modify the approach based on your school and your needs. But know this, a simple plan is a plan that you will implement. A complex plan is one that will sit on the shelf and collect dust. And some of you are chuckling because you could probably turn around and see that plan that was developed by subgroups and categories, and everyone had their input, but no one's really using it. This is very common. I see it all the time. So I want to thank you, and I'm going to look here real quick. Rob, if you're on the line, I do not see Rob. Okay. Well, hopefully you guys can come back to next Friday, our next webinar. That's where we're really going to get in. We're going to sink our teeth into the Beyond Technology model. Rob has a great partnership with Microsoft, and there's a new pricing model that that Rob is able to give to you as schools that brings your software pricing down. It's based on number of full-time employees versus number of computers. So basically you license based on the number of full-time employees, and Rob will tell you how to calculate that. But that's your price on that number. And so it doesn't matter how many machines you have access to all these tools, Microsoft tools, that are very low cost. So please come back on Friday. Like our Facebook page. Every day I'm combing the internet for ideas, and every day I'm putting the best of those ideas on our Facebook page. We will be creating our website blog within the next couple months, so we will be generating our own custom content about technology integration. But I do want to thank you. Please join us on Friday. Please like our Facebook page. I'm a typical marketer now, I guess. And I thank you for your time. And I don't see any chat questions. You will be receiving, I do see one. I do see a couple questions. Give me a second here. Let me answer some of these questions real quick. There's going to be a newer version. Am I able to get this on PowerPoint? If you ask me on the Facebook page, I will send you a copy of the PowerPoint. Where do you see the skill of keyboarding being taught? Between 2nd and 3rd grade, keyboarding should be taught. That is the one thing that requires drill and practice. So I will encourage schools to either make less. The most successful model I've seen is a school picks a grade, usually at 2nd or 3rd, and they have less homework during certain classes, and the parents are encouraged to buy a keyboarding program. We help schools actually get a real cheap one and encourage keyboarding at home. You can spend all day, every day keyboarding because it does require that much time, but it should be covered in 2nd or 3rd grade, and there should be a semester just dedicated to it if you haven't done that. Perhaps this wasn't mentioned. Will this webinar be available to listen to again? I am recording it, so yes. Now, there's going to be an upgraded version of this presentation that we will be delivering live. If you're an ACSI school and will be attending the administrator conference at Fish Camp in February, we're going to be showing the new and improved version of this presentation. And so we encourage you to come to the conference. And not only are we doing the upgraded version of technology trends and statistics, but there's also going to be a presentation on the Beyond Technology model. So if you missed this or you'll miss Friday, please come to ACSI. And yeah, again, if you want a copy, please join our Facebook like page, and I will put up the link there for everyone. In the beginning of the presentation, you mentioned social networking. How does that fit into your planning? Well, social networking, what we do is that usually comes more into the curriculum part. I have a lot of teachers that use either real social networking sites or simulated sites, which are a little more safe, a little more able to control, and they're doing creative projects within that, so the students get excited about the content. There's a tool out there called Twiducate that I see some of my teachers use. It looks like Twitter, but it's all controlled and managed by the teacher, so that there's no outside people in there, and the students can put up conversations and again Twitter with each other using a computer. There's different ways, but yeah, when we do integration with teachers, depending on their ability level, we try to push their limit, but some of the higher end teachers want to get involved in some of these, and we do the actual development for them using those social networking tools. I worry about security risks and think they may outweigh the benefits. Security should always be an issue. Security is probably one of the key areas of the infrastructure model that we plan with you. But again, this is the same issue we had when the telephone first came out, and we started putting telephones in classrooms, and there was this outcry. Kids have access to people anywhere in the world and content. They could listen to inappropriate conversations. Well, we figured out how to make the telephone work in the classroom. We could figure out how to make the computer work. It comes down to two things. You need to have a policy in place that is signed by your students and by your parents. That's first and foremost. The other is supervision. Expect what you inspect, folks. We also encourage families that you should have the computer in a general area. It should not, you could have it in the bedroom, but it's usually better if kids are accessing that stuff where it's kind of in the general area. But yeah, you should be concerned about security. The PowerPoint will be available if you join the Facebook like page. Thank you. Thank you for your keyboarding answer. Thank you. Appreciate all you do for us. Oh, Mr. Ely, how are you doing, Mike? Folks, thank you so much. That is the end. Hopefully we'll see you on Friday. If not, we'll see you at Fish Camp for all you ACSI schools. Thank you very much.